Hello and welcome to episode 1 of what we're calling the Planning Pulse. The aim is to produce this as a fortnightly update of all things planning here at Wealden. The idea is to have different presenters and speakers, but for today I'm joined by Stacey.
Hi everyone and welcome. As Sam says, we've had this idea for presenting what we think are easily digestible updates for what's happening in the planning world and in our service. If you find this helpful, then please let us know in the comments, or if you have any ideas of what you'd like to hear, then please let us know.
So let's jump straight into it. We're going to talk primarily today about recent planning appeals, more specifically about 2 high-profile cases on the edge of Uckfield, a site known as Wealden South, and another at land at Downlands Farm. Stacey, why are these cases important to us?
Yeah, thanks Sam. So where to start really? These sites are really quite high profile, and we mention them because there are a series of important issues which I think will apply to a lot of land in the district, and that is principally ancient woodland. But before we get there, I'll give a quick history of the sites and kind of why we ended up at appeal. Both these applications had previously been refused before, both Wealden and Downlands, but it was quite a while ago now, over 10 years ago, and there was a conjoined public inquiry with Wealden North, South and Downlands for much bigger development at that stage, and all 3 of the sites at that time, 2009, were refused. Didn't hear much about these schemes until just recently, after COVID that is, where developers approached us to indicate they were going to make fresh applications. The Wealden South was a scheme for 240 homes, plus an on-site sang, and the Downlands development, quite a bit bigger, was 424 homes, also with an on-site sang.
Well, hang on, at this point I think maybe we need to briefly explain what a sang is, as I don't think some of our listeners will necessarily know that. So what's a sang?
Yeah, I don't know if I could do it briefly, but essentially, SANG stands for Suitable Alternative Natural Green Space, and it is a mitigation tool and an avoidance measure relating to new development sites on land around and within 7 kilometres of the Ashdown Forest. Now, listeners probably will know that the forest is a protected area, European protected at that, and it's principally for ground nesting birds, but also for the quality and continuity of the heathland. I think I'm right in saying it's the largest surviving block of heathland in the country. But anyway, it is susceptible to recreational pressures and harms associated with new homes, but more specifically, increased pressures from residents that are incoming to those homes, who go to the forest and walk and cycle or generally enjoy the forest. There's a particular sensitivity with dog walking and dog walkers, and a link between dogs roaming off leads affecting these ground nesting birds. Anyway, SANGs aim to provide alternative spaces for recreational activity. Generally, that is via contributions towards strategic SANGs in the district at both Crowborough or Uckfield, but sometimes, as in both these appeal cases, developers can present an on-site SANG as part of their development package, and the specific details of a SANG, its size or quality or characteristics, are all laid down by Natural England.
Okay, thank you for that. So getting back to these appeal cases then, how did they come to be? So, well, firstly, like we said, we had 2 separate sites. One wasn't determined and the other was refused. But what that means in both instances is that the developers that applied were able to appeal against their applications, and both of them chose to deal with their applications via something called a public inquiry. Essentially, that means that they're allowed to present their case to a planning inspector, and we are cross-examined about the evidence that we put forward and are able to do the same to them by using barristers that help support us during those cases. So there were a number of main issues in relation to both of these appeals. Principally, that included the location of those developments in terms of their relationship to Uckfield, and also the impact of the developments on Uckfield town centre. But common to both of these parcels of land, and the main reason for raising these appeals relates to ancient woodland that affected both of the sites.
That's right. Yeah, ancient woodland is a particularly pressing issue in the district. There's extensive blocks of ancient woodland, and for those listeners that don't know, it's a protected woodland and defined as irreplaceable habitat, and it's afforded extra protection by government legislation. And I don't mean a tree preservation order, it's more than that. There are specific restrictions relating to ancient woodland, purely and simply because of the length of time that it has existed on a parcel of land and the associated features, including the ecology, the ground conditions, the nature and type of the understory growth, and so on and so forth. It's given extra protection in the planning assessment. Now, these cases were of interest, and they're definitely worth anybody interested in ecology or ancient woodland for reviewing the decisions, because of the way in which the planning applications proposed development in relation to ancient woodland, development within what's called the buffer zone to the ancient woodland. That includes both houses, recreational routes through the buffers, proposals for on-site drainage within the buffers, but also impact on the ecology within the ancient woodlands. And why it's of interest is that in both cases, developers argued that their development schemes would comply with national legislation, something which is called the standing advice issued by Natural England and the Forestry Commission, and we can put a link below to the latest standing advice. That is the guidance which all decision makers measure and test developments that affect ancient woodland and irreplaceable habitat. And to our mind and our reading, it's really quite restrictive, and it lays down the do's and the don'ts. But what we had in these two cases was developers arguing that their development proposals complied with the standing advice, whereas in reality, they rode roughshod over the approach within the standing advice.
Okay, so those were the issues that were discussed and debated during the course of the inquiry, but what was the outcome?
So both appeals were won insofar as Wealden was successful in defending the appeals, and they were dismissed, so they were rejected. The independent inspectors upheld the decision of the council that permission should not be granted. And they're further worthy of note because of the specific commentary around Natural England's advice to Wealden around the use of sangs and paths within sangs and the ability to have a sang within the ancient woodland. The point being there that you've got irreplaceable habitat, yet developers were encouraging activity within the ancient woodland. We said, and subsequently the inspectors agreed with us, that it was incorrect to allow that recreational pressure amongst protected trees and irreplaceable habitat, with an associated impact on the soils and the ground flora and fauna and impact on wider ecology, including from things like adverse impacts from lighting and urbanisation from approving people that close to the sensitive habitat. So they were both rejected. Unfortunately, though, and a quick cut-in note at this point, we applied for our costs, and it's probably a separate planning pulse in and of itself that people think that costs are awarded in every appeal situation. It's not quite as simple as that. You have to make an application and explain why you are entitled to your costs, that you have been subject to unreasonable behaviour and that behaviour has put you to wasted or abortive costs. We applied for our costs in both inquiries, and unfortunately we were not successful in either case, notwithstanding the fact that we won and the appeals were dismissed.
Okay, well that's the two main appeals that we wanted to talk about recently. So what we also wanted to just cover with everyone listening is that we have a meeting of Planning Committee South. That's to be held next Thursday, 29th of February, and the agenda for that has now just been published. We can link to that in the comments section below. The most significant case that's being brought to that committee is for a scheme at land adjacent to Batchelor Road in Hailsham. It's been reported to Planning Committee previously, but we're taking it back to Planning Committee due to a governance issue around the decision that was made previously, which is explained fully in the report, and hopefully going through this process now will address that.
Yeah, that's right. And just a very quick comment on this, because there might be some raised eyebrows around us reporting the case back. But there was an issue to do with members' declarations. And so to de-risk the decision, we've got to report that back to committee for a fresh resolution. It's as simple as that, and there's no more to it than that issue. Okay, so just to close then and trail what's coming up next in the second episode, you'll all probably be aware of the emerging Wealden local plan. And so next time on The Pulse, we'll be joined by Nicola Waters, who's going to talk to us about the new local plan, what it is, where we've got to, but crucially, all the consultation processes that are under something called the Regulation 18. If that sounds of interest, then be sure to join us next time.
So thank you everybody for listening. Just a reminder that I'm Sam Batchelor, I'm the Development Manager here at Wealden District Council.
And I'm Stacey Robbins, Head of Planning and Environmental Services.
And we'll see you next time on the Planning Pulse.